You believe the gold standard was honest money, don't you? That it was this golden age when your dollar was backed by something real, when the system was fair. That's a comforting story. It's also completely wrong. The gold standard wasn't killed by greedy politicians. It was murdered by its own brutality. If you think bringing it back would save you, you're missing the real lesson about who that system was designed to protect. Moving on, let's look at the golden lie. I'm Tom, and this is Tom Thinks. I'm here to cut through the Wall Street jargon and give you the real talk on your money, even if it hurts your feelings a little bit. If you've ever looked at your shrinking savings account, watched your rent go up, and thought, man, we should just go back to the gold standard, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now look, the gold standard has become this romanticized fantasy in personal finance circles. People talk about it like it was this Eden of financial stability, this honest system where a dollar was a dollar and your savings couldn't be stolen by inflation. But here's the thing, the gold standard wasn't honest money. It was a death warrant for anyone who wasn't already rich. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you actually thought about what the gold standard meant for regular people? Not for economists in textbooks, not for politicians giving speeches. For you, for your grandparents, for the factory worker in 1893 who watched his entire life savings evaporate because the country ran out of gold. Here's what most people don't realize. The gold standard wasn't a single system that worked perfectly for centuries. It was a series of brutal experiments that kept failing, kept crushing the working class, and kept getting patched up until finally in 1971, it just couldn't breathe anymore. And when it died, nobody came to the funeral except the bankers who had already escaped its limitations. Here's the psychological problem. Humans love the idea of scarcity. We think limited supply equals fairness. If money is hard to create, we tell ourselves then it's honest. But scarcity doesn't create fairness. Scarcity creates a caste system. When you tie the entire economy to a metal that happens to be in the ground, you're not creating honest money. You're creating a lottery where the winners are the people who happen to own the mines or had the gold already. Think about what the gold standard actually required. It required the entire economy, every transaction, every paycheck, every mortgage, every single business to be constrained by how much yellow rock some guy in a mine could dig up. Does that sound like a rational system to you, or does it sound like a religious belief dressed up in economic language? And here's where it gets really uncomfortable. The gold standard didn't die because of some conspiracy. It died because it was too cruel to survive the 20th century. The system killed too many people, it destroyed too many families, it created too much misery, and eventually even the people who benefited from it realized they needed a system that didn't spark a revolution every 20 years. Moving on, let's look at the Institute. Now I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine there's this elite institution. Only the wealthiest families get to send their kids there, and the rules are simple. Half of them will die, not metaphorically, not lose their jobs. They will physically die. And the families know this going in. They've known it for generations. They still send their kids. You might be thinking, Tom, that sounds insane. No family would do that. No parent would sacrifice their child for status. But here's the thing. The gold standard was that institution. Every few decades, the system would seize up. There wouldn't be enough gold to back the currency. Banks would fail. People would lose everything. And the wealthy families, they'd watch. They'd hold their gold tighter. They'd let the system burn. In 1893, the United States experienced one of the worst depressions in its history. Banks failed by the hundreds. Unemployment hit nearly 18%. People starved. And why? Because there wasn't enough gold. Seriously, the entire economy collapsed because there was a shortage of a shiny metal. Not because of war, not because of natural disaster, because the monetary system was inflexible and cruel. Here's what most people don't realize about panics under the gold standard. They weren't accidents, they were features. The system was designed to punish the weak. When the economy grew faster than gold could be mined, the system had only one response: contraction. Prices had to fall, wages had to fall, people had to suffer. It was built into the mechanism. And the wealthy families who controlled the gold, they knew this. They counted on it. The same way those fictional gold families in Red Rising knew their kids had a 50% chance of dying at the Institute. The wealthy few who understood the system didn't try to fix it. They profited from its cruelty. When the panics hit, they bought assets from desperate sellers at pennies on the dollar. They made fortunes from the misery the system created. Now, you might be thinking, Tom, that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but stick with me here. The gold standard wasn't a secret plot. It was a structure, and structures have incentives. If you tie the entire money supply to a finite resource, you create a permanent class of winners who control that resource. You don't need a conspiracy, you just need physics. There's only so much gold. Whoever owns it controls the economy. This is where it gets interesting. The gold standard didn't just create inequality, it created a specific kind of inequality that was almost impossible to escape. If you were born without gold, you had to borrow gold. And borrowing gold under a deflationary system is a death sentence. Because the value of the gold you owe keeps going up, while the value of the things you produce keeps going down. It's a trap designed by geometry. Moving on, let's look at the day fine trap. Let me tell you a story about a Finnish businessman. In 2015, this guy got caught driving 64 miles per hour in a 50-mile-per-hour zone. A speeding ticket. You've probably gotten one, cost you maybe $200, right? This guy's ticket cost 54,000 euros. Not a typo. 54,000 euros. Why? Because Finland uses something called a day fine system. The fine is proportional to your income. Rich guy speeds fast, he pays a rich guy's fine. And that's exactly what happened. The system calculated his daily income, multiplied it by the severity of the offense, and handed him a ticket that would make most people's jaws drop. Now, here's the question. Is that fair? The American system says no. In the United States, fines are flat. A $250 speeding ticket is the same for a minimum wage worker as it is for a millionaire. And that's treated as justice. Same punishment for the same crime. But let's think about that for a second. If a minimum wage worker gets a $250 ticket, that's roughly a week's worth of food. That's a missed rent payment. That's debt. That's a cycle. In Ferguson, Missouri, we saw exactly what happens when flat fines collide with poverty. People couldn't pay, so they got warrants. Warrants led to arrests. Arrests led to more fines. The system became a debt trap that destroyed lives over minor infractions. Meanwhile, the millionaire paid $250 and forgot about it before they reached their next exit. Same crime, same fine. Completely different reality. Is that really equal treatment? Or is it just treating unequal people equally, which is its own form of injustice? Here's why this matters for the gold standard. The flat fine system and the gold standard share the same philosophical flaw. They pretend that one size fits all, that a single rule applied universally creates fairness. But the world isn't that simple. When you impose the same monetary constraint on a growing economy full of different people, you don't get fairness. You get winners and losers selected by arbitrary criteria. The gold standard said every dollar must be backed by gold, period. Whether you're a farmer in Kansas whose crops just failed, a factory worker in Detroit whose plant just closed, or a banker on Wall Street sitting on a hoard of gold. Same rule. But the rule didn't hurt everyone equally. The banker could survive a deflationary spiral. The farmer couldn't. And here's the cruel irony. The people who pushed hardest for the gold standard were often the ones who would survive its collapse. Creditors love deflation. If the value of money goes up, the money you're owed becomes more valuable. Debtors get crushed. Landlords thrive. Renters suffer. The same system that feels like stability to someone with assets feels like a noose to someone with debts. Now, I know what you're thinking, Tom. The gold standard kept inflation in check. That's true. It did limit inflation, but it did so by making deflation the default. And deflation is not stability. Deflation is a slow-motion disaster that transfers wealth from the many to the few, from borrowers to lenders, from workers to owners. Moving on, let's look at the glass castle. There's a poem in a collection called Glass Castle. It describes someone standing in a castle made entirely of glass, afraid to move, afraid to speak, afraid to laugh or cry or love or try, standing still as stone, soft as sand, lost in a castle with paper-thin walls smeared with dry erase lies and hopes and dreams, all muddled and lost within each other. I read that poem and I thought, that's the gold standard. A glass castle, beautiful to look at, impossibly fragile. Everyone inside is terrified to move because one wrong step and the whole thing shatters. And yet they stand there, frozen, pretending it's a fortress. Here's the reality of the gold standard that the romanticizers don't want you to think about. Between 1870 and 1914, the era often called the classical gold standard, There were major financial crises in the United States in 1873, 1884, 1890, 1893, 1901, and 1907. That's 6 major panics in 44 years, one every 7 years. Does that sound like stability to you? Each of those panics was brutal. Banks failed. People lost everything. The economy contracted. And each time, the gold standard made it worse. Because when a panic hit and people rushed to convert their paper money into gold, the system couldn't expand to meet the demand. Money supply was locked. The only option was contraction, bankruptcy, and suffering. Here's what most people don't realize. The Great Depression was made infinitely worse by the gold standard. Countries that abandoned gold early recovered much faster. Countries that clung to gold suffered for years longer. The system that was supposed to be the anchor of stability became the anchor that dragged the entire world economy to the bottom of the ocean. And the wealthy families in their glass castles, they had gold. They could wait out the storm. They could buy up assets for pennies on the dollar when everyone else was forced to sell. The same system that destroyed the working class enriched the elite. Not because of any conspiracy, because the structure of the system naturally did that. It was an inequality machine dressed up as sound money. This is where the psychology gets fascinating. People cling to the idea of the gold standard because it promises certainty in an uncertain world. If money is just paper, they think, then nothing is real. It's all just trust and hope. But if money is gold, it's tangible. It's real. I can hold it. I can trust it. But here's the secret. Gold isn't any more real than paper. It's a metal we've collectively agreed is valuable. If aliens landed tomorrow and announced that gold is actually toxic and they've been using it as landfill on their home planet, the entire system collapses. Gold has no intrinsic value. It has assigned value, and assigned value is just a collective hallucination we all agreed to believe in. The difference between gold and paper money isn't reality. It's flexibility. Paper money can expand when the economy needs it to. Gold can't. And that one difference, flexibility, is what separates a system that can adapt from a system that shatters. Moving on, let's look at the death warrant. So when did the gold standard actually die? Most people will tell you 1971. That's when President Nixon closed the gold window and ended the dollar's convertibility into gold. That's wrong. That's just when they held the funeral. The gold standard had been dying for decades before that. World War I was the first blow. Countries suspended gold convertibility to print money for the war effort. They promised to go back to gold after the war. The United Kingdom tried in 1925. Winston Churchill, who was Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, made the decision to return to gold at the pre-war parity, and it was a disaster. British economy was strangled. Exports collapsed. Unemployment soared. The decision has been called one of the worst economic policy mistakes of the 20th century. Why was it so bad? Because the economy had changed. Prices had doubled during the war. But Churchill insisted on returning to gold at the old exchange rate. That meant the pound was overvalued. British goods became too expensive to export. Industry contracted. Workers suffered. All because of loyalty to a metal. John Maynard Keynes called gold a barbaric relic. He wasn't wrong. The gold standard demanded that economies sacrifice growth, employment, and human welfare to maintain a fixed exchange rate with a metal. It's like refusing to treat a patient's illness because you're committed to keeping the hospital's thermometer perfectly calibrated. You're not maintaining health. You're maintaining a measurement. Here's the thing about the gold standard's death that most people don't understand. It didn't die because economists didn't believe in it. It died because it was too cruel to survive democracy. When people have a vote, they eventually vote against a system that starves them. The gold standard required periodic purges of the economy, waves of deflation and unemployment to correct imbalances. And eventually, the people who suffered those purges said, "Enough." This is a pattern that repeats throughout financial history. Systems that concentrate benefits on the few and costs on the many eventually collapse under political pressure. The gold standard is just the most famous example. The same dynamic is playing out today with student debt, with housing policy, with healthcare costs. When a system is stable but unjust, the instability eventually comes from the people it crushes. Now, here's the irony that keeps me up at night. The people who romanticize the gold standard today are often the same people who would have been crushed by it. Small business owners who carry debt, farmers who depend on commodity prices, workers in competitive industries. The gold standard would not protect them. it would destroy them. They're rooting for the system that would eat them alive, but they don't see it, because the story of the gold standard has been told by the winners. The bankers, the creditors, the gold owners who thrived under the system, they wrote the history, and their history says the gold standard was stable and honest. What it doesn't say is stable for whom. Moving on, let's look at the freedom formula. So what do we actually do with this information? If the gold standard isn't the answer, if going back to some imagined golden age of money isn't possible, then how do we protect ourselves from the system we actually have? Here's the truth. The fiat currency system we have today is not perfect. It's not even good. It has its own problems: inflation, manipulation, inequality. But it's better than the gold standard because it can adapt. Central banks can expand the money supply during crises. They can bail out banks. They can print money to prevent depressions. These powers can be abused, but they can also prevent the kind of mass suffering that the gold standard regularly delivered. The question isn't which system is perfect. The question is which system is survivable. And the fiat system, for all its flaws, is more survivable for more people than the gold standard ever was. But here's the secret that most financial gurus won't tell you. You don't have to choose between systems. You can build your own stability within the system we have. The goal isn't to find the perfect monetary system. The goal is to make yourself resilient enough that you survive whatever system we end up with. What does that look like? It looks like diversifying your assets. Holding some cash, some stocks, some real assets. It looks like keeping your debt low so you're not at the mercy of deflation. It looks like having skills that can't be automated, relationships that can't be devalued, and a life that doesn't depend on the government getting the money supply exactly right. Here's the math that matters. If you have 6 months of expenses saved in cash, you can survive a banking crisis without panic. If you own assets that produce income, you can survive a recession without bankruptcy. If you have skills that are valuable in multiple economic environments, you can survive whatever monetary regime the government throws at you. Gold standard died because it couldn't protect people. The fiat system survives because it can adapt. But neither system will save you. Only you can do that. So here's your action step for today. Stop looking for the perfect system. Stop waiting for politicians to fix money. Stop dreaming about going back to some golden age that never actually existed for people like you. Start building your own resilience. Pay down your debt. Build your emergency fund. Learn skills that keep you valuable. And remember this, the system is the storm, not the shelter. I'm Tom, and this is Tom Thinks. The gold standard isn't coming back. And if it did, it wouldn't save you. It would eat you. So build your own shelter. Make yourself hard to destroy. That's the only freedom that matters. If this video made you think differently about money, share it with someone who still believes the fairy tale. And as always, keep thinking.
Found this interesting? Subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like, share it out, and drop your questions or ideas in the comments. Until our next adventure.